Grace and peace be with you on this day. The reading from Psalm 1 gives us a description of people we all have seen and known. It's the image of a person that sits with God and meditates on God's love. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water. Now, this is an image that we tend to ascribe to people who are in the Spirit, who are seeking the Spirit of God. And the mistake that we make is that we attribute this type of activity as to the only way to experience the Spirit of the living God. We think that in order to experience God, we need to go and meditate, possibly in a high mountain or in a quiet room. We need to go ahead and practice a lot of spiritual disciplines and fast and, make ourselves more holy. But in reality, every single one of us, regardless of our background, regardless of our walk in life, regardless of our religion, we are designed to experience the Spirit of God from birth. And we see it with children. The scriptures do tell us that Jesus said it's not until you can become like a child that you can enter the kingdom of God. Why is that? Well, it is that easiness that children have with being able to experience the Spirit of the living God. I am always amazed and surprised by people who tell me of their experiences with the divine while walking on the beach, while picking up some seashells, while playing with their grandchildren and hearing it in the laughter of children, while possibly cooking a delicious meal. These very, very mundane daily activities where all of a sudden in that daily activity they have the openness to experience God. And I have to tell you that it gives me pleasure. It gives me a sense of reassurance because it's so hard for me. And you would think that I, as a pastor, would be able to experience God a lot easier. But what's happened is that, we all get stuck in the day-to-day, in the rush and getting things done, that if I don't go ahead and make some time and set it aside, if I don't go ahead and do that prescribed time of meditation, I just might find myself having several days in a row that were not days where I may have experienced God. But yet I do have that openness. I do have that sense of flexibility with the Spirit where all of a sudden I'm surprised that in a very unexpected place, surrounded by a very unexpected situation, I have found the Spirit of the living God. And it happened to me once at a concert. I was there listening to Fleetwood Mac. And wouldn't you know it, while Mick Fleetwood was playing the drums, the Spirit of the living God came, and I recognized it at that moment. It happened to me while hiking on the Appalachian Trail. And true, the hike on the Appalachian Trail, I kind of designed it in such a way that it would open me up to more of those experiences. But when it happened, it just it blew me away. And I've come across people who have shared with me their testimonies. They talk to me about having to hit rock bottom, having to go down that very, very difficult path that eventually led them to, call themselves addicts. And it wasn't until they hit rock bottom that they were able to see the Spirit of the living God. And so it's not so much that we have to be the perfect person or the faultless person or the one who is constantly, putting our hands together in prayer. But maybe we just have to try to have some sort of access in our daily living. And we might be able to surprise ourselves. You've heard me say it before in previous sermons. I've said it during Bible study, and I know I've said it in conversation with different people, that it's not so much the Bible that leads us to belief. Our belief comes from the God experience, having a God moment. When we have a moment that we could identify in our history, in our timeline, and say, yes, it was at this moment when this happened in my life, it was at this intersection, and such thing happened, that I experienced the divine. It's those moments that lead us to belief. The Bible and church and so forth, what they help us do is to frame it into vocabulary, into language, so that we can then explain it to others. And as Christians, we use the teachings of Jesus and we use the person of Jesus and of the Christ to help us channel those God moments in a way that leads us to hopefully have more. In today's passage from the Gospel of John, Jesus is talking to a rabbi named Nicodemus. And I want to say that again, Nicodemus was a rabbi. Jesus is not talking to a child or to a teenager. He's talking to someone who's studied the Scriptures, who has dedicated his life to understanding God. But we don't know that much about Nicodemus other from this passage. We don't know, first of all, if he's young or old. Is he new to the profession and wet behind the ears? Or is he old and hardened? We don't know how he came to be a rabbi. Was he pushed into the profession by his parents? Or did he always dream of being one? What we do know is that Nicodemus is searching for God. And the fact that he was searching for God led him to Jesus. He says, I have to speak to this man. And we know from that conversation, as recorded in the gospel, that his language revealed that he had not experienced God. He did not have that God moment. And Jesus is looking at him like, you should know this. You know, why are you asking me this question? You should know this. And why should he know this? Because he's a rabbi. But so from this point on, all I have is this conjecture that maybe Nicodemus was the kind of rabbi that was, especially in first century Jerusalem, very concerned about the laws, about the Mosaic laws. And back then, that's how they understood their pathway to God. You had to follow the laws, and if you followed all the laws well, God would grace you and bless you. It's actually not very different from what a lot of Christians believe today. That we somehow or another, we have to earn our way to God's blessings. So Jesus tells Nicodemus that we can't control the Spirit of the living God. It's like the wind. We don't know where it came from and we don't know where it's going, but it definitely twirls around us and it moves us. And many of us are open to this wind. Many of us are actually trying to sense it at all times. And we might look for it in the small events of life. But how many of us can call and find those small events of life and actually say, this was God? How many of us could say, this very, very, very insignificant moment that I had with a child, that was God? How many of us can get the ordinary and recognize it as extraordinary? How many of us actually have to have something big happen, have a rock bottom moment in order to recognize God? Or how many of us have to have a close call with death in order to have our eyes opened? What joy it is to find God and experience the love of God in the small pleasures of life, possibly in the soft feel of green grass underneath our bare feet on a hot summer day, possibly in the words of forgiveness that are extended to us by a loved one, possibly in the kindness of a stranger when you most need a stranger to hand you a wet paper towel so that you could breathe. I'm so moved by Jim's testimony. I'm so moved by his testimony, recognizing that it's something that I hope none of us will ever have to experience. That I hope that it's just a one moment in a century, in who knows how many lifetimes, that we will never ever have to live through something like this again. And yet it's so easy to go ahead and from his testimony connect to other experiences that we may have had. Earlier this week I was talking to a woman whose grown daughter has become estranged. The grown daughter wants nothing to do with her parents. And I spoke to the mom. And the mom is just completely beside herself, not knowing how to explain it, not knowing how to approach it. And she is as broken on the inside as somebody who would have taken a leap from the World Trade Center on 9/11. It has just shattered her to have this estranged child, and she can't do anything about it. She can't do anything about it because the child is choosing on her own as an adult to say those words, to behave that way. Earlier this week, in my close circle of friends, one of my friends passed away at the age of 61. And I was talking to her husband this morning before church, and he called me at 8:20. I'm on my way to come out to do church, and I think he either A, forgot I'm a pastor and I'm on my way to church, or B, he really needed me. And so I stopped everything, I pulled over, and I had this conversation with him. When a loved one passes away that we think is going to be around for such a long time, it is as painful as when a child becomes estranged, or is as painful as any other trauma that we might experience. And for every single one of those situations, my advice is the same. And that is, look for the Spirit of God. God is with you. God is with us. It may not feel that way. It may feel like you are alone in your pain. It may feel that there is no getting out of it. But God is there. God was there to baptize this child. God was there to celebrate. God was there in the good moments, and God is there now, walking with you. And during such difficult moments, in the midst of such grief, it is easy to fall into that trap of saying there is no God, or God doesn't care, or possibly even to blame it on God. And if that is what happens, I say that's all right. God's back is big enough to take it. But have faith. Have faith. That estranged child, it might take a decade, but that child might come back. That loved one who passed away, the virtues and the love that you experienced with them will always remain. And that pain that you're feeling today because of whatever the situation may have been is one that's going to make you stronger. It's one that's going to make you who you are. So the image of the survivor tree is actually an image for each and every single one of us. Every single one of us has had a situation that scarred us, that amputated a part of our soul, that somehow or another created a difficulty that we thought we could never come out of. And just like the survivor tree, we could attribute our healing to a community that took the time to heal, to mend, and to love. And we stand today a bit better, a bit different, not maybe as we imagined we would end up being, but still here, and able to be grateful. Grateful for all that we have, and grateful for the opportunities that are set before us. And so consequently, when Jim said that he had a moment of clarity, that there's a reason why I wanted him to repeat it, because that is the purpose of church. That is the purpose of Sunday worship. To have everybody have their moments of clarity, not just once and not just for an instant. Let's see if we can make it expand and become a season of clarity. Let's see if we can have them as often as we could possibly get them, so that as we are journeying through life, we are in constant awareness of how God's Spirit is calling us and moving us, so that regardless of the difficulties and the challenges that we might be facing, we're able to face them with joy, with hope, with love, and in a way that inspires others to overcome their own challenges. Friends, on this day, the Spirit of the Lord is upon us. And it cannot be controlled. We cannot predict it. But I pray that we recognize it. We recognize it because it's with us at all times. Let us surrender to that Spirit and feel the joy that comes when we turn our lives over to God. Let us be able to tap into that moment when we said, yes, I see you. I see you, Jesus. I see you in my life, and I turn my life over to you. How good that feels. The relief and the wonder that comes with it. May it happen today. May it happen every day of our lives, and may we be able to convey that to others. Amen.